Well, here we are on Maundy, Thursday. This is the night that Jesus began to teach. Some of the greatest teaching anywhere in his teachings happened on the Thursday night. This is the night that he gathered his disciples for what we call the Lord's Supper. It's called the Last Supper as well. And I think it was a Passover meal according to Luke's gospel. It was. Now, according to John, remember they used two different chronologies. But he gathers with them. It's also when Judas leaves to go and deny and to literally betray him. And then it is also when they make their way to the Mount of Olives, to eventually down to the garden. And so there's a lot of teaching. If you follow Mark's gospel, you can follow along in chapter 14. John's gospel actually has the most about that night. And it has where it starts with him gathered in the upper room with the disciples. And it doesn't really talk about the Passover meal as such, but it talks about him gathered with them and something he did with them. And then there's teaching that happens there. And then they leave, and there's teaching that happens, I think, as they walk from the upper room all the way over. Now, there's a very interesting theory that the upper room might have been in the home of Mark, the disciple. We don't know that. We're not even sure where in the city it was, but it was a good walk from there over to the Mount of Olives, where he would pray at the foot of the Mount of Olives at what's called Gethsemane. So as he walked, he would teach them. And one of the greatest lessons he taught was he gave them a new commandment. Now think about this. As he's preparing, he's going to be up all night. He's going to be tried the next morning. It's a mockery of a trial. He's going to be beaten. He's going to be scourged. He's going to be made fun of. And then he's going to spend 6 hours tomorrow on a cross. It's a horrible, horrible death. And listen to what he teaches them about love. A new commandment I give to you. This is John 13:34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. And by this, all people will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another. One of the last lessons he taught us, one of the greatest lessons. And then chapter 14 of John, when he talks about don't be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house were many mansions or many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. But I'm going to go prepare a place for you. And I will come again, receive you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. So he's preparing them. That's when Thomas said, but how do we know the way? And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then into chapter 14, he gives them that great blessing of peace. And he begins to talk about the comforter that he's going to send, and the comforter that will be with them in his absence. But it's really the presence of Jesus with them in the form of the Paraclete or the Holy Spirit. Chapter 15, I'm the vine, you're the branches. A lot of people think he might have been looking at some of the gates on the walls of the city and of the Temple Mount, and he was looking at the grapes that were on those gates, and maybe they were just etched in there, but he was pointing them out and having a conversation about, I'm the vine, you're the branches. John chapter 16 and 17 continue to talk about the Holy Spirit. And John 17, one of the greatest prayers ever prayed for us, is the prayer of Jesus in John 17. Now, I want to go back to the first thing that happened in the evening. It's when he gathered his disciples in the upper room. And he did something that they couldn't understand. He took a towel. And he took a basin. And he began to wash their feet. And as he began to wash their feet, their reaction was, no. Simon Peter very explicitly says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. He didn't understand what Jesus was doing. And then listen to what Jesus says. When he had finished washing their feet, he put his outer garments back on and resumed his place there at the reclining at the meal. Do you understand what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example that you should do just as I've done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you're blessed if you do them. Now, what was Jesus talking about? Can you imagine the night before he is crucified? He's thinking about serving others. Now, think about this. Not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about what he's going to endure, what he's going to have to go through. No, he's showing the disciples one of the greatest lessons of love, and that is that you serve one another. That's what it means to follow Christ. And they're going to know we're his disciples by the way we love one another and the way we serve one another. So he said, I want you to see this lesson, and I want you to go and do likewise. Now, for us, washing someone's feet, if the Lord impresses upon you to do it physically and literally, then absolutely do it. Many of you remember when God impressed upon me to wash Brother Jim's feet. That was at the end of that season when Jim and I were together here. God just spoke to me in a clear way and said, you need to serve him and you need to honor him by washing his feet. So I know there have been moments when I've done that. I've washed Rachel's feet. She's washed mine. It's an unbelievable thing. But you don't have to do it just in a literal way. Is there a way to serve your neighbor right now? Is there a way to serve somebody that's going through a very difficult time? Listen, this weekend, when you stream the Easter service at 10 o'clock, man, we've got some exciting things to tell you that we're able to do to help people. And we're going to do it as a church. So maybe for you, the question is, how can I serve? How can I be like Jesus? Now, you have another option. Because tomorrow is Good Friday. And on Friday, Pilate, the Roman governor Pilate, was trying to deal with Jesus. And he asked him questions. You can read the account in John's Gospel, in John chapter 18. And Pilate is frustrated because he doesn't want to crucify Jesus. And so he basically says, look, I don't want anything to do with him. And he took a basin. Just like Jesus did. He took a basin. Except Pilate literally poured it over his hands. And he said, I have nothing to do with this guy. His blood is not on my hands. My hands are innocent. So in other words, one basin was used to serve others. The other basin was used to say, I have nothing to do with him. We choose. We choose to live our life out of one of these basins, out of one of these attitudes. To distance ourselves from having to serve others, from having to be like him, from having to do anything with him. Or we take up a towel, we take the basin, and we find ways to serve. So on this Monday, Thursday, will you be like Jesus? Will you serve? And it's in serving the world will know you belong to Jesus. I've always said you're never more like Jesus than when you serve. So rather than washing our hands of him, let's be like him and serve. And I believe that God will use it in an incredible way. May the Lord bless you. Tomorrow, on Good Friday, we have our Good Friday service at noon and at 6 o'clock. So I will not be doing a devotional tomorrow. And then Saturday will be the last one as we prepare for an incredible resurrection day. I want to thank you again for being a part of this journey with me.